All right, thanks for tuning in to Prime Sports NASCAR for this Monday, the 11th of November, 2019 on the Prime Sports Radio Network, brought to you by RaceReviewOnline.com, RotoWire.com, and Covers.com. Make sure to visit Covers Experts at experts.covers.com, and you can take 50% off any purchase by using the promo code PRIME50. That's PRIME50. CJ Denny Hamlin dominates in Phoenix, and he is one of 4 drivers that will have a chance to win the championship this Sunday at Homestead.
Yeah, very interesting. I think we expected a Joe Gibbs domination here at this track, even though Kevin Harvick's been the dominant driver at that track over the past couple of years. But Kyle Busch has really come on strongly in the past 2 years. And I think with Kevin Harvick and the Stewart-Haas team doing so well at Texas, maybe we were expecting just a little bit too much of them. But those of us who pay attention knew that Joe Gibbs was definitely going to be the one to beat coming into last weekend.
And I'm looking over my notes, and it turns out that I've got the lead again in our fantasy standings. How did that happen?
It's amazing how those extra points for playoff wins tally up real quick.
Yeah, and now we've only got, between the 3 of us, we are separated by less than 200 points, and there's about over 2,500 points up for grabs. So that just tells you that we're all in this thing, and anything can happen. So that makes it a lot of fun. You have Truex, correct?
Correct.
And Eric has Harvick, and I've got Hamlin and Kyle. So I've got a little bit of an edge there with two of the 4 playoff drivers. My other best drivers, Blaney. Your best drivers are Larson, Keselowski, and then Eric's best are Elliott and Logano. And Joey, boy, it looked good for him early. Then he just faded fast. And once Kyle Busch started to open up that lead on Logano with Hamlin in first place, Joey knew the only thing he could do in order to get to the championship round, he was going to have to try to find a way to win the race. But there just weren't any cautions. There were just, I don't know what was spinning in all the crew chiefs' heads as far as what to do strategy-wise, but there really wasn't anything to do when you only had like 1 caution until the last, that very last caution with a few laps to go.
Yeah, the long run really, really hurt Logano for whatever reason, whatever went wrong on his car. And I never fully heard, and I don't even know if they still know today, kind of what went wrong with him. But man, he went from the front to the back real quick. And when you've got long green flag runs at a 1-mile track like Phoenix, there's very little that you can do from pit road. And I was actually surprised. I was expecting it to go to the end. We had the one car that was coming into pit road toward the end there, and they were just talking. The announcers were just saying, well, maybe he's going to get to pit road. Maybe there's going to be a caution. Nope, there's not going to be a caution. Oh, yes, there is a caution then, because it was somebody else that had gone up the wall too. But that definitely made it a little bit more interesting. It would have been probably more interesting if that had happened a little bit earlier, because I think you would have really seen some differing strategies and, the teams really coming forward and having an impact versus very little impact actually yesterday.
Yeah, and the only other driver that had a chance to shake things up was Ryan Blaney, and he has really grown up, as we mentioned, after the last lap pass at Talladega on Ryan Newman to win. Boy, has he been dialed in over the last several races. He did everything possible to try to get into the Final 4. It would have been interesting if Denny Hamlin wasn't involved, what Ryan Blaney could have done going up against Kyle Busch. But that was also a good thing to see, because you've got 2 of the young top drivers, Elliott and Blaney, that have had really good seasons. And to see one of them have such bad luck over the last 3 races and just not have any chance at all, just everything taken away from him, Chase Elliott, it's at least good to see the other young driver perform as well as he did.
Yeah, Elliott, his bad luck really reared up on him these past 3 races. As you said, it was a shame not to see him do more with it. Ryan Blaney, I think he's one we got to look out for the future, because he was pretty much, he was in the wake of his teammates Logano and Keselowski for the vast majority of the season. It wasn't until the playoffs started that he got his first win, and then started really ripping off some good results. And last week was just another, or yesterday was just another example of that. I think if he's able to get on top of his game every year when it comes to the playoffs, this is very good experience for him this year. He's going to be really hard to beat, and I think if he can add just a couple more wins earlier in the season to get those extra bonus points, a little bit of a cushion, so that if he does stumble into problems in the playoffs, he's able to make it through. I think he's going to be in a really strong position. And both those guys, the experience that they've earned this year, with as far as they've gone and all the things that they've accomplished, you got to be looking out for them in the years to come.
And
for sure.
he's like one of the very few drivers, not based on past history at Homestead, because he doesn't have a good Homestead record, Blaney, but just how hot he is. And he doesn't have to worry about Logano or Keselowski. You know, well, should I interfere here? He's one of the very few drivers outside the top four that I give a shot to do something this week. And unfortunately, Chase Elliott, who does have 3 good results at Homestead, you just can't give him a chance because he's just it just any time during a race over the last three weeks, something bad happens, and when you're in that kind of a drag, you're just not going to snap out of it with a win. So who would you? Is there somebody to blame? Because I don't blame Chase Elliott. So is there somebody to blame as far as or is it just bad luck of what's gone on with Chase Elliott down the stretch?
Well, he's had 1 mechanical failure and 2 crashes. Is that correct? I think is what we've seen out of him. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's trying a little bit too hard, being a little bit too overly aggressive on the setup, and that's making things on track a little bit difficult for him to hang on to. Perhaps that's part of it. So maybe it's a little bit on him, maybe a little bit on the team. I think they're going to learn from it, though. You're right. I don't think that they can bounce back after a couple of weeks of poor results like they've had and the bad luck that they've had. I don't think they can bounce back this week. Not to say that they're not going to have come out and do a decent race, because they're always capable of doing that. But I don't think coming out and winning is realistic. Whereas, like you said, with Ryan Blaney, he does not have a good record here. His best finish is 17th, which he did twice. But he is one, based on what we've seen, how he's progressed throughout the playoffs, that can come back and actually challenge for a win. And he could make it really, really interesting. You've had to win this race the past couple of years to win the championship. I mean, if Ryan Blaney comes out and takes the win, or somebody else comes and dominates it, then it's going to be totally down to the calls that people make on pit road to be able to gain track position for restarts, and being able to just be a nose ahead of the competitor to be able to try to win that championship. But I wouldn't pin Elliott's bad luck on necessarily anybody other than perhaps teething issues as he grows within the team and within this situation. I think every year as it moves on, every week as it moves on, I think this team's going to figure out ways to get things done, ways that they can get better, and ways that they can avoid those things.
Well, Chevy itself has had a ton of issues this season, including down the stretch. So there's probably a lot that goes into
they're not Toyota this year, that's for sure. And Ford was the only one that could compete with Toyota at the beginning of the season, and they've fallen off as well. Harvick and Blaney, who seem to be able to pick it up back these past
And
couple
speaking
weeks.
of Ford, they're, of course, the sponsor of the race. And Keselowski and Logano have performed well at Homestead. So that's maybe another...
With 3 Toyotas.
Yeah, right. There's those,
3 Toyotas.
Yeah. So, but you would think that for Blaney's sake, it would probably help him out in this particular race, that he can go to his teammates and find out what the situation is there. Because this is the best year he's ever had anyway, so maybe we shouldn't worry too much about the previous 4 results here and compare him to this one. Because I can't think... Look, Keselowski looks like he's just given up on the season, and he's had a pretty decent history here. And, of course, Logano won the race last year and has had a very good history here over the last 4 trips, including leading 80 laps last year. But I can't imagine Joey Logano is going to be up to winning this week's race either. Maybe he will. Maybe he'll want to screw someone. I don't know. Maybe if Kyle Busch or Denny... That's going to be the big drama, is if Denny Hamlin or Kyle Busch were in his way, exactly what happens.
Yes, exactly right. I think that's the only way Joey Logano gets involved. But being a past champion, as scrappy as he is, and quick to spot off at the mouth, just like a number of other ones, I would bet if it comes down to it, and we saw it last week too. He had the chance when he was getting lapped. He could have messed with Denny Hamlin, but he let him go by. So I would bet he's going to kind of stay out of the way. But it would be interesting if he perceives somebody racing him, like if he's out front, somebody comes up and tries to rough him up or wrestle him out of the lead, and it happens to be one of the championship contenders. I do not think he would hesitate to dump them. But if he's not running up front, I think he's just going to back out of the way, though. But yeah, that would be the more interesting storyline of the
And the
bunch.
other driver that I'd probably give a shot at outside the top four would be one of your fantasy drivers, and that's Kyle Larson,
Mm-hmm.
because he has been fantastic here without winning, leading 324 laps over his last four races at Homestead, including three top fives. And he's coming off a solid fourth place finish last week. Of course, he was trying to also get the win so he could move on to the championship round. So you wonder about the hangover there. But again, if you're looking at drivers outside the top four, let's keep in mind that since they changed the format to four drivers with a chance to win the championship over the last 5 years, the winning championship driver has won the race all 5 times. So one of these years that's not going to happen. And maybe Kyle Larson is somebody that could break that spell this week.
Yeah, fifth, second, third, and then 13th last year, his last four races at this track. And even though he finished 13th, he still led 45 laps last year, started 11th. And his first fifth place, and even his runner-up finish that I mentioned as well, he started outside the top 20. So he's definitely got speed here. This is a track that suits him extremely well. It would be interesting some year to see him still in contention for the championship to come to this track, because he is extremely good. He doesn't have the win yet, but I have a feeling that motivation of getting a championship would push him over the
Yeah, there are
edge.
going to be some drivers, the young drivers, the Larsons, the Blaneys, and such, that are going to realize, and I'm sure they are looking at this race as a way to learn what they have to do, even though it changes next year, right? Phoenix is the championship race next year.
Yep.
So where does
Yep.
Homestead go? Is it second to last Homestead next year?
I think it's second. I think it's second to
Okay, so
last.
it's
Yeah,
still
I'd have to
obviously
look
a very
at
big
the schedule.
race next year.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm sure that these drive. I mean, look, Larson's got enough history here, but still, a win is it has eluded him. All right, now let's take a look at some of the interesting storylines. As far as I mentioned, this is going to be the sixth year under this format, and we've had five different champions in the 5 years in this format, which bodes well for Denny Hamlin, since he's the only one out of the other three who have all won here before, that has never won the championship. And interesting that the only driver that started outside the top five when he won here during this Final Four format was Jimmy Johnson, starting 14th in 2016. And we all remember what happened that year. It was the craziest finish to any championship or any race that we've seen in a long time, let alone a championship race. And Jimmy stole the championship, leading 3 laps. So what it tells you is you want to qualify well at Homestead.
Yeah, you absolutely do. This is like Phoenix. It's a track position type of track. So restarts and track position. The whether you do two tires, four tires, however you get up there at the front, being up front is going to be the most valuable thing. And I remember talking before and after, we weren't counting on Jimmy Johnson doing anything that year, and he totally snuck it out and surprised everybody. Just like last year, I don't think Logano was the favorite going into last year. I think he was more
No,
of an
you're right.
underdog as
You're
well.
right. Yeah.
He was able to come out on top. But when you get down to these last few races, the top four guys, they're the top four winners all seasons. So if you look at all of the wins that have come from single drivers across the year, these are the top four winningest drivers that we've got this year. So it makes all the sense in the world that they are the top four that are going in with a shot at the championship. And like you said, Denny Hamlin, he's got a little bit of um, revenge, I guess, that he would want to take back at this track, because this is the first time he's back in the Final Four since that very first season, and he didn't do so well. He ended up losing out to Kevin Harvick. But you're right, he's the only one among the four that has yet to win a championship. He does have 2 wins here, which is more than the other three guys, though, too.
Yeah, and interesting. Even though pole position the starting position is so important, we haven't had a pole sitter win at Homestead in 16 straight races. So you have to go back to Kurt Busch, I believe, over
Correct.
17 races ago since a pole sitter won. That's kind of just fluky, I think, with as many top 5 drivers have won under this format. And also keep in mind the last 3 winners at Homestead were Ford, Toyota, Chevy. So no significance there. That's good to see. I am a little bit worried about next year at Phoenix, though, just bringing that up, because the last couple of races, things were going pretty well. We were getting spoiled with racing in the series for a while. But the last couple of races, we've kind of been bored again with dominating wins by Kevin Harvick in Texas and Denny Hamlin in Phoenix. And to know that Phoenix is the site of the championship race next year, boy, I hope they make some changes, because we don't want to see that type of domination winning a championship.
No, it's going to be very interesting. It's definitely wouldn't have been my top choice. I wouldn't go so far as to say Talladega or Daytona need to be the finale, but maybe someplace like Martinsville or Bristol, someplace like that, someplace where the driver really makes more of a difference than the team or the car. Would like to be able to see it come down to them versus somebody just hitting the setup properly and then being able to drive away from the rest, kind of like we saw
Are they
yesterday.
planning on switching? Is there any word about, well, no, we're going to be in Phoenix for the next 5 years? It's just a year by year kind of thing. They haven't said anything after next year?
I haven't heard anything after next year. Usually, probably I think mid-season is when they announce any kind of schedule changes. I'm willing to bet, though, that based on the way that track contracts are written, I'm willing to bet that it's a multi-year thing. I
Wow.
wouldn't think that they would switch it out after 1 year. So I think we're going to be there for a couple of years. But having said that, I think they'll be more open to, like, Miami. Homestead's been around forever. I don't think Phoenix is going to be around forever. I think it'll be a few years, and then they'll rotate it somewhere
I mean,
else
it should
after
be
that.
like the Super Bowl. I mean, go different places every year. I
Yeah,
mean, even
I
and
don't
don't
disagree with
worry
that.
about it being cold. Oh, it could be 45 degrees if we go to Bristol. I mean, don't worry about any of that stuff. It would just be better for the sport, and it's more fair for the sport if you go to different tracks. We've talked about that. It was such a benefit, an extra benefit to Jimmy Johnson all those years to
Yeah.
have the playoff races and at tracks that he had dominated over his career. So it would just make a lot of sense if they just changed it every year, change that championship race so it's not an advantage for any specific driver.
You never know. Could happen. I completely agree. I would love to see it switched up more frequently than they do. Good news is that they're open, or at least showing that they're
Yeah.
open to change it around. So maybe we'll get some more. Maybe
All
it'll work
right.
out
So
well.
with the 4 drivers, who do you favor any of the 4 right now? If you take a look, you got Kevin Harvick and Truex. I've got 8 top tens and 9 playoff races apiece, and the only race they didn't have a top 10 was Talladega. So that shows you how consistent they've been. Harvick has been fantastic at Homestead over his career as well. A lot more so than Truex, who has only been dialed in the last 2 years. But that's very important because he finished first and won the championship in 17, and it was runner up to Logano last year. So we know how good they are. And Denny Hamlin's got a pretty good career at this track, and he's got 3 poles in his last 4, which is, of course, as we just mentioned, is very important. And then you have Kyle Busch, who hasn't won a race since June 2nd, so he still has that lingering over him. But overall, he's been okay at this track. We won the championship in 2015. And if you look at it, the other 3 times Kyle Busch came to Homestead with a chance to win the championship, he finished second, fourth, and sixth. So that's pretty strong. So it's very tough to figure out. I mean, this is such an even 4 that maybe we've ever seen it.
Yeah, I was looking through the past results on these four, trying to figure out which one would be the, the best choice. Kevin Harvick's got the best average finish over the most recent races. Like you said, though, Martin Truex Jr. with the first and the second, if you just look at the last two races, he would be the one to beat. All of them in the past handful of races have led about the same amount of laps. Kyle Busch has been very strong here. Denny Hamlin's got the 2 wins, as well as the poles, like you said. I think just based on current momentum, Hamlin goes in as a favorite. He's picked up a lot of steam in this back half of the year, but I don't think Kyle Busch is going to be very far behind him. I would put those two at the top right now.
Really? I'm
We'll see
surprised
how.
that you're putting Kyle
Yeah,
up there. Okay.
yeah, we'll see how practice plays out. But
I mean, but it
I
just
just
shows you
wonder
how close it is, because it really shouldn't surprise anybody which drivers you pick.
No, but I think what for me puts Kyle there is I wonder if he hadn't gotten the radio message that Hamlin needed to win, if he would have been able to bother Hamlin a little bit more on those last couple laps yesterday. I think he was battling Blaney on the restart, but I think a couple of times he shifted up into the high line and actually gained some momentum on Hamlin. And I wonder how much he backed off, knowing that he had a comfortable gap back to Blaney, and he wanted to see his teammate come through and get 3 Joe Gibbs cars come in. I know Kyle Busch is a competitor and he's always going to go for the win, and I know winning is his ultimate.
Yeah, well.
I just wonder how much of that was in the back of his head. And he's been improving. So he doesn't have the win since earlier this year, but he's steadily been progressing up. And with a runner-up finish 1 week ago,
That's right.
he's going to be really hard to count.
And look, I definitely think that had something to do with it. Yeah, he had fresher tires, and that
He had 4.
Yep, he had 4. So that was that. Yeah, and but I don't see. Even if anybody wants to say, "Oh, it's a conspiracy," Kyle Busch let Denny Hamlin win. Even if someone wants to say that, it's like, well, what are you talking? They're freaking teammates. What do you think they were? Yes, that is what they're supposed to do. So as long as he knew he was in, a matter of fact, it would have been a story 10 times more controversial if he would have won and robbed Denny Hamlin of a chance to get in. That he would never have heard the end of it.
Yep. And I don't think his boss, Joe Gibbs, would have been very pleased with him. So every single fan, every Denny Hamlin fan, every fan out there watching would have been more angry about that. And I'm sure his team owner, Joe Gibbs, would have really let him have it. I mean, they're the first team to have 3 cars in the Final Four, to have one of their drivers snatch that away just to eliminate one of his contenders.
And it's a bonus for him to have a teammate in the championship round as well. Why would he want Joey Logano in the championship round?
Would not. Absolutely would not. Absolutely would not. You want to keep it in-house if at all possible. You are your number one, fan or whatever that you're trying to look out for in any given race. But then after that, it's your team.
That's it. And it's not that we know what'll happen at Homestead. Every man for himself. We get that.
Yes.
But he's thinking about himself as well. He's not just thinking for the team. He's thinking for how can I best win the championship. And how he could have done that was exactly what he did. Just beat Joey Logano and get Denny Hamlin in the championship, so he doesn't have to worry about someone that's not his teammate. So.
Yep, and I think that makes him more hungry for this week too, because I guarantee you in his mind he thinks he had a shot at winning that race, and I'm sure he backed off a little bit, maybe not a ton, but I'm sure he did in the back of his head, and going into Homestead, a spot where he could win it all. He's been so dominant this season, and then just adding one more week of not being in victory lane, I think that all adds up to a very hungry Kyle Busch at the perfect time.
All right, so who should be the favorite of the race?
Denny Hamlin. I think Denny Hamlin goes in the favorite just based on his recent momentum.
And who do you think will be? How do you think it'll go 1 through 4?
Oh,
just as far as the odds, not your predictions.
As far as the odds, it's going to be Hamlin. Probably Truex and Busch will be even, and then I would say Harvick would be the long shot.
Okay, it's gonna be interesting. I know Kyle's got such name recognition, but for some reason I think he's gonna be the long shot. I think Harvick, because of his history at the track, I think he's gonna go a long way, and I think Harvick is gonna end up. I wouldn't be surprised if Harvick was actually – I would go opposite. I wouldn't be surprised if Harvick wasn't the favorite of the race. And and then Truex and Hamlin were kind of co-second. But that's why I said, I mean, I'm sure Eric will have a completely different idea as well when I talk to him on Wednesday. And that's just this is why this is setting up to be a great Final Four. And last year was the first time the top four drivers finished first, second, third, and fourth in the race. And I would be surprised if it didn't happen for a second straight year. That's how good these drivers are coming into this race and on this racetrack. I expected to, and it'll probably be 1, 2, 3, 4 the entire race, just in different order, of course.
Yeah, I would expect all four of them to be running easily in the top five, if not in the top four, battling it out. And I do think it's going to come down to whoever makes the right call on pit road, those last, whatever that last restart is, whether it's 5 laps from the end or going into overtime, or even if it's as far as 20, 30, 40 laps before. Whoever makes that track position call at the right time to get out front, I think track position is going to be more important than anything.
And the good thing too is we know that if there is a late caution, a late restart, and let's say all four of these drivers are involved, we could see the kind of craziness that we saw when Jimmy Johnson won the championship. We could see guys bumping and doing anything they can to get them. And you know what? Even if it's the three teammates battling it out with each other, like I said, all man's to himself. Just go at it, and I'm sure as long as nobody does anything dirty, as long as they're all just being competitors, that it could be just fantastic. And I certainly hope that nobody wants to see a 70-lap green flag run with the winner winning by 4 seconds.
No, absolutely not. But can you imagine if it finished with all cars banged up and way out of contention? Somebody else wins the race.
Yeah, it comes Kevin Harvick.
Yeah,
Kevin Harvick wins. That's how Jimmy Johnson won. He stole the win because that was Carl Edwards' race to win, and he choked. He just choked. That's what Carl Edwards did. But then it was just mayhem after that, and Jimmy Johnson all of a sudden found himself in victory lane. All right, CJ, so we'll get your picks, and we'll talk about them on Wednesday when I speak with Eric. And I'm sure we'll talk again when the season's over to kind of wrap it all up. So thanks, as always. What you're going to be doing for RotoWire this week?
We will have our fantasy preview up right after qualifying, again, focusing on the top four and who's obviously we think they're all likely to go for the win. So they'll definitely be featured in that. And then we'll have a season recap with the barometer that goes up 24 hours after the race. We'll do a little bit more of a long-term preview, who's got work to do and who's kind of set up well, ending the season, going into the off-season, getting ready for Daytona in February. All on rotowire.com.
Awesome. Thanks, CJ. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.